Hello and welcome to the final segment of Next Build Virtual. We saved the best to last. We're going to have a conversation with the Autodesk Letters group, who kind of came to notoriety early this year, writing an open letter to Autodesk about many different things, but predominantly development of Revit, licensing and costs, etc. In our discussions since, we've covered many topics and looked at loads of different IT issues that face the design practices today, and I thought it'd be a great idea to get some of the team together to discuss topics which are pertinent to every practice, and also looking forward as to what kind of things we need to fix and improve the ways that we work. If you could please introduce yourselves now, I guess starting with Ian, and then kind of, I would say clockwise, but it changes on Teams, isn't it? So.
Thanks, Martin. I'm Ian Godwin. I'm an independent consultant, and the reason that the Open Letters group came apart was because I also facilitate two groups. I facilitate the Digital Design Leaders group on behalf of architectural practices, and also the IT Leaders group. And those groups were very much the inspiration behind the open letter, as a result of the growing frustrations in the marketplace of the of Revit, and also the cost and compliance issues that were around in the market. So I'll hand you over to Mr. Dunn, probably.
Thank you, Ian. I'm Nick Dunn. I'm the IT Director at PRP. We're members of both of the groups that Ian mentioned, and we have put a name to the letter because we feel that yeah, we want to see things improved, and cost is becoming an increasing issue. I'll hand over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Nick. I wasn't prepared. I'm Jonathan Carty, Head of IT at Corstefine and Wright Architects. My first day on the job, so I'm not going to elaborate any further. Previously of GHA, and yeah, I echo Nick's sentiments. For me, cost is a big one. Yeah, the changing the goalposts each and every year in terms of licensing. And I'll hand over to James.
Hi, I'm James from Glen Howells, Head of Digital Systems at BIM. Used to work with Jonathan, who's now moved on. Again, sort of echo the sentiments of the group that, you know, for us, we've seen dramatic changes in cost models and license types, whilst not seeing those changes or progress on the side of the software tools themselves. I'll hand over to Kevin.
Hi, I'm Kevin Fielding, the practice BIM lead for Shepherd Robson. Again, I think a lot of the things have already been said with regards to our ambitions for the open letter. We're looking to for clearer direction in terms of licensing moving forwards, and also a targeted development of the Revit product itself in a way that's aligned with our needs as a practice. And next, I'll pass over to Aaron.
Yep. Good afternoon. My name is Aaron Perry, Head of Digital Design at Alford Hall Monaghan Morris Architects. Yeah, joined this wider group of people and the proposal to put this letter forward as part of an outcome following some discussion that we had as a group, where we really talked about we're in a pivotal moment in 2020 in terms of suggested strategy, price increases, changes to how the licensing models work with Autodesk, and that, of course, combined with the sort of stagnated development of the Revit platform and design tools within Autodesk specifically. really kind of allowing us to kind of question that at this moment in time as to where we wanted to go for the future. And Fabio's just joined the call. A bit of an introduction from yourself. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fabio Roberti. I'm the head of BIM in Wilson Air, also working with CP. Christian, he's the head of the IT. And yeah, as mentioned before, we have issues for license compliance, and we are discussing how Revit could be a better platform in the future. Thank you.
We have Christian.
Yes, hi, Christian Poulton. As Fabio mentioned, I work for Wilkinson Air as well. Along with all the other comments raised, I think one of my bugbears is trying to support this platform on new equipment, and it's quite a dated code base. We get really frustrated trying to link in with new environments like virtual desktop, that kind of thing, and it's just getting increasingly difficult to get performance out of this software, and we're paying a premium price for it. So it's one of the drivers for getting on board with this letter, to see where Autodesk are going. Are they actually going to be developing any further for this product?
Was there anyone else online?
There's me as well, sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, sorry. I'm Peter Jeffs. I'm an independent BIM consultant. I've worked with lots of companies in the UK and also Australasia as well. So got a sort of wide-reaching sort of view on things, hopefully. Working with SGP at the moment, Stephen George and Partners. So here representing them. Definitely echo the sentiments of the group. You know, I think that there's almost like an ecological change that's needed, really. Autodesk seem to have cornered the market a little bit, and I think that you know, there's definitely scope for open source applications and things like that need to be driven by the customer, not driven by the software companies themselves. So it'd be good to see something happen there.
We'll come on to a question about that later, but I think it's fair to say since the letter came out, you've had a number of meetings with Autodesk corporate and product development, and there's ongoing progress on some of the issues. But Ian, there's we're developing a manifesto for the group, as well as if you can give us an update on the number of people who've signed the letter and where we're at on that.
It's about 180 organisations that have signed up and supported the letter. The intention is very much to keep the momentum going behind the principles in the letter, and try to hold Autodesk to account. You know, with the customers are seeing substantial change in the license model. There's the potential of enormous, you know, additional admin overhead as the named user model comes into play, and it's you get the feeling they're not listening in certain quarters, and we want to be able to make sure we're an effective voice, and so we will try and keep that momentum going and the voice of customers around the world heard.
And the manifesto is going to be.
We're just working towards the way that might break down at the moment, and looking at the different issues that we brought up and how those the topics can be turned into a sort of set of priorities to engage with Autodesk further.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the other part, so part of it was this introduction, get people to know who you are from the open letter side of things. But because you're all your day-to-day jobs are running the IT infrastructures of so many design practices, we thought it'd be a great idea to throw out some questions, forward-looking questions as to all the different aspects of design, from concept through to handing over and life cycle, what kind of technologies you're seeing or looking forward to using, or have used and are looking forward to using more. So I think this part we're going to open up looking at just the conceptual design phase, which for me is the worst catered for software area at all. No one seems to have got concept design. I guess you could say SketchUp have got concept design to a certain extent with the way that they managed to dominate their view. But I'm just wondering how you feel towards the way that your firms use, what do they use to do early stage concept design, and what is it that the industry needs to push it forward? But go with Aaron first.
Yeah, it's a funny one, because obviously with an architecture practice of our size, as you can probably imagine, there's a lot of questions around the kind of software portfolio that we have as an organization, and why we have certain tools, when we use certain tools. And we've done a huge mapping exercise in the last kind of 12 months or so to kind of really understand our usage of those tools, the number of licenses we have of those tools, and how much we spend with the different vendors, and why. Why are we so varied? And there's definitely a point in architecture about you go and talk to some directors that run practices. They don't care about the software. They care about the people that are driving the design. And actually, I think for a lot of us, that's why we end up with such a large array of different tools, especially at the conceptual stage, because if you've just kind of hired a team of 3 or 4 people and they are absolute experts in Rhino, you're just going to let them use Rhino because that's the best tool for them to convert that idea that they've got into something. And likewise, SketchUp or MicroStation or whatever it might be. So I think fundamentally there's always going to be that. There's going to be what is the best tool for that group of individuals to convey their idea and to flex that idea and to kind of play around with what's possible and quickly convert updates and redesigns into that at an early stage. So I think fundamentally you're always going to have that. And I think that's a kind of a challenge to the vendors, because the vendors typically will specialize in something. They won't specialize in kind of a little bit of everything. And, Rhino is fantastic. It has a barrier to kind of get into it. Whereas obviously SketchUp's barrier is sort of non-existent. Anyone can learn that almost immediately. So there's kind of there are an array of a balance of kind of trying to get a tool to be incredibly powerful and incredibly flexible in terms of being able to do anything, and then having a tool that's incredibly user-friendly and very easy to kind of get to grips with. So, within our practice, I'll use an analogy that somebody at SketchUp once told me. SketchUp is a pencil in the pencil case of tools that you may use as a business. And we do use SketchUp. We do use Bentley products. We do use 3D massing in MicroStation, for example. We do use Rhino, and we've been talking about Autodesk a little bit. There's the kind of the format involved in there, and I think fundamentally, many of those tools don't always quite recognize that there's a lifespan within that tool. That those are not your delivery tools. Those are typically your kind of initial design conceptual tools. And I think for any vendor that actually starts to recognize that and realize that and get comfortable with that position, the sooner they build a better integrator into your delivery tool, the more successful they're likely to be, because the more people like us on this call will start pumping resources into training people and to supporting those kind of products. Because as soon as you kind of got that workflow ironed out and smooth, I think you'd actually have a lot of support and evangelists in this kind of group and this kind of forum to try and prioritize using that tool at early conceptual stages.
Yeah, I think the way we work is similar to AHMM to a certain regard. The way we tackle projects depends on the typology as well, and the tool is particularly crucial to that. We work across a variety of sectors, so we may be looking at building form initially or building massing. If we're doing something labs or something in healthcare, we'll start looking at the adjacencies of the spaces. And then there's also the test fits as well. How many units can we fit on a particular site? So each one of these kind of ways of working requires different methodologies and different processes, and obviously different tools as well. So some of these are data-driven designs, whereas other ones are very much about the geometry as well. So picking the appropriate tool for the particular stage is absolutely crucial to what we do. So yeah, like a lot of other practices, SketchUp at this moment in time does play a part in what we do. We're also driving Rhino as well, because we feel in terms of geometry it has a very good links, or potentially very good links, with Revit. And also, obviously Revit as well is integral to the way we tackle conceptual design as a practice, especially when we're doing test fits. But the key thing really is, as Aaron touched on, is about the data between platforms. And obviously this is key to the idea of BIM as well, is the transfer of information. So it will be Excel into Revit, or it will be SketchUp, Rhino into Revit. Ultimately, we might do documentation within there. We need to go out into other platforms for visualization as well. So it's ensuring that it's ensuring and understanding that Revit isn't necessarily the go-to platform for conceptual design. And as such, we need Revit to be able to support the manipulation and transfer of this information between platforms. And at this moment in time, we don't feel necessarily that it's there. And what we kind of need from Autodesk, or certainly from my opinion, is that we want them to acknowledge that Revit isn't the tool where you go from conceptual design straight through to construction or handover, and that there may be other tools that are best suited for other for particular purposes. And at those points, we want to be able to drop out into those and bring the information back in seamlessly. And at this moment in time, we don't feel that those workflows exist, and those were actually supported within the Revit environment, and we'd like for that to improve.
I think one of the interesting things as well is that in those early design stages, and you've highlighted it, Kevin, there's multiple ways to skin a cat, and also multiple influences. So the analysis of whether it's environmental analysis or embedded carbon, or site orientation, site context, there's so many free-flowing influences on the concept design that you've got to be able to bring in to have an impact on because the decisions you make in a concept design phase go with the project a long way down the line. If you get those wrong, it's incredibly expensive to sort them out later.
Yeah, it's interesting because I mean, at PRP we're primarily residential sector, but we also do master planning, and we have environmental engineers, and we're finding at the concept stage SketchUp is very heavily used here. We then take that into products like Enscape. We've got some 3D guys that are using 3ds Max and V-Ray for CGIs, but then we've got the engineering team, and they're doing wind analysis, they're doing light analysis, they're doing all sorts of other analysis, and they're being driven by the formats that the software providers are forcing them down. So we'll do some concept design in SketchUp, but then the wind analysis we're looking at, they're relying on a Revit model. So we're then having to take things from SketchUp, and it's often then being reworked into Revit because the integration is not that great. So they're reworking it into another application to then being able to run the analysis software. So it's incredibly disjointed. Yeah, we'd like to see a lot better integration between all the stages of the design through to working drawing stage, because we do end to end. We do the design, we do the delivery, we do the analysis.
So really your model wrangling starts at the concept stage.
Yeah.
So the whole problem of model wrangling that I've kind of seen in further downstream when you're working and collaborating with other firms, that's the tail end of it. The actual start of your juggling starts at the start.
Yeah. Internally, you know, we've got different departments dealing with different parts of that design process, and they're using different types of models to run their analysis and run their design.
And historically, I've always heard of the designer who rocks up when you're in detailed design stage with a change that they've made in SketchUp that they want to incorporate into the Revit model. Have you figured out a way of trying to sort that person out?
No.
So you literally have to look at their model, break it down, and say what have you changed, and then go into the actual model and figure it out.
Yeah, and then often redraw it.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean that's a good point, really. I mean, the whole life cycle of design is very cyclical, isn't it? You know, part of what we do is about testing bad options as well as good ones, and sometimes you can only sort of get towards those optimum design solutions by testing some of the bad ones first. So sort of embracing tools that help you, you know, test quickly and bin off quickly and perhaps preserve certain bits is always really key to that. I think, you know, we can all widely accept across the group that we can't see a position where there's a one-size-fits-all and one tool to support all of that. So actually being able to move between those tools elastically is really critical to that. You know, as Nick said, when you're either considering analysis or you consider visualization or you consider, you know, form creation and any documentation that comes out of that. You know, it's all how they wrap up and cycle around each other through those optioneering loops as well. It's yeah, it's really important.
Because the story gets told with the quality of the drawings and the models that come out of that process and the engagement with the client. So whilst it's concept stage, it's got to look more than a concept in many ways, because that communication challenge and getting a client on board to understand people's ideas is a vital part of that. So there's still, you know, when you talk about MicroStation being used in those early stages, is because it outputs high quality graphic 2D elements, or whether it's going through Adobe Illustrator or through other you know, graphics tools. The deliverables are there to be communicated to the client in order to understand what value he's getting out of the process, and the architects are adding, designers as total are adding. Fabio, what you say?
The connection between the tools, as everyone said, is very important. And recently we saw Rhino Insight that improves this collaboration between Rhino and Revit. And of course, everyone would expect more development in these areas when we can smoothly connect both tools.
So it's interesting that Rhino Inside has been totally developed by Rhino themselves, so they haven't had any input from Autodesk.
I think that's the only way it could have got developed, to be honest. I think the other thing is that you're talking about trying everything. James, you were saying trying lots of bad things before you get the good things. Well, what I'm seeing is there is a growth in the number of analysis tools to run at the concept stage. So when you do try or model something, you can say, it doesn't work. But the problem is nearly all the analysis tools provide feedback that's written in engineering, and the architect doesn't necessarily understand the output from the analysis. So I think I was talking to a CFD developer, and he said it's colors for designers. You know, red is bad and blue is good. So, but that doesn't really mean anything. So, how do you feel towards the analysis tools that you're using at the early stages? Is there room to grow? Do the architects need to learn more about what the analysis is doing?
No, that's a really fair point, actually, because the trick with analysis tools, depending on which project stage you're working on, is sort of picking out the design principles from them. Yes, we know that waiting later down the line to get very robust Part L models done to, you know, consider compliance is really important. But actually, at the really early stages, we need to figure out what are the key principles in the location we're in, with the form we've got, with sort of the areas that give us some viability in the scheme, can help inform that design in a positive way. And yes, we're not sort of experts at reading lots and lots of data, so sometimes colours, I'm an architect too, so colours help inform what we're looking at as part of that work stream. And like Nick on the call, we also have some wind analysis tools, some daylight analysis tools, but for us, we're always trying to find a tool which gives us the key principles out of that, and be those informing design principles that we can then make informed decisions from. That's the really critical bit.
I think there's a program called Sapphire that I used over in the Australasian part, and that was a specific SketchUp, or very much tailored into SketchUp analysis, and that was definitely the red, amber, green kind of result, which did respond quite well to the SketchUp model and gave us some fairly instant feedback, and we felt that was a very good fit for early concept stage. But again, any sort of changes like post-developed design that you had to kind of like reintegrate that back in, it was always a very disjointed process, so really nothing that kind of helped you pull it through like as a sort of holistic kind of process. Really, it was a very sort of disjointed process.
I mean, we're fortunate that we've got a group of engineers that we can rely on. The architects can rely on to go and get that analysis, and they use a whole host of tools. I mean, I thought there might be one. We use IES, we use SimScale, and we use a number of other products. And that there is, if you want the detailed analysis and the really true results, then Sapphire I've looked at before. They won't use that. They need other tools that give a lot deeper analysis and a lot more detail, and then pass that on to the architects.
Yeah, that's I think that's the challenge, is getting that balance between kind of what James was hinting at, where it's too early to be doing the full assessment, but it's also, you need something, and it's where do you put your trust, and where do you have your balance, and a lot of the tools that are available, or a lot of the tools that become available, and the surge of new tools that you were talking about earlier, Martin, that's come about, is the confidence that you have in those tools. And some of the challenges we've had previously with certain vendors providing tools is that they can be quite specific to where they were developed. So they're all based on sort of US standards. They're all lead orientated. They're all, any of their data points that they show is always in dollars per square foot, and, things like that. And you've got to think about, obviously, the applicability to the market. You've got to think about also that analysis and how it's being calculated versus, say, UK construction and UK orientated buildings. But you've got to balance that at early stages, and perhaps similar to Nick, as architects, we have an in-house building performance group that have built tools themselves, which we then have the confidence in what it's calculating and how it's calculating. And I often think sometimes where you just give a tool and say, oh, press one button and you get a result, that you've really got to bring critical thinking to that, as to whether that's useful and to whether that's valuable. And it probably involves then a lot more duplication in the industry, because we have a carbon calculator within embodied carbon calculator. We built that ourselves. We know that many others are available, but we chose to build something ourselves because we can better understand exactly what it's doing and how it's working, so we can have that confidence in the information that's coming out the other end of it.
I think it's about understanding the liabilities as well within the organisation. We generally try to avoid getting very deep into design analysis, so wind analysis, solar and daylighting. We will do some initial studies to inform our designs, but when further analysis is designed, we tend to rely on the professionals that are kind of expert in those fields. We are conscious about extending our liabilities beyond what we should really, and in those instances, we'd much sooner rely on the experts.
So I think someone mentioned open source earlier in the discussion. And obviously, there's things like Blender, which seem to be getting meteoric interest from people like Microsoft now backing them and stuff. So there are viable open source tools for conceptual design, maybe even for BIM with Blender BIM. So what do you think about open in a also mentioning, Kevin talking about risk. If you're using software that's open sourced and you're relying on the output from it, there's a risk problem. But also the development speed of it is not going to be particularly driven, perhaps as a funded application. So kind of what do you think about open source? What do you think about Blender, and what do you think needs to happen for firms to try and make the best use of open source in the companies?
I think with the nature of the software market fragmenting, I think open source provides another opportunity for the people who are looking for tools, and obviously they can be more agile in finding a place and finding potential tools that might fit a need, and then you've got the opportunity of creating a community that understands the arguments behind that particular piece of software, and potentially helping to focus it. So I think it will have a sense that it will be a growing part of the market moving forward, but a bit, as Aaron says, you've got to be able to justify what's behind the scenes. You've got to be able to see what logic brings and adds to the solution of the problems that you've got in a way that means something that where you can control that liability. So I think yes, it is going to grow because there are more architects as programmers who can potentially contribute to it, and because the market needs more and more tools to solve problems that are changing every day. Isn't
there an argument that everybody's reinventing the wheel? I mean, Aaron's saying that they've got carbon capture stuff that they've written, and there are other ones available. I bet you that I can name 2 other firms that have written carbon capture. So a lot of the kind of little open source tools that people are writing, there's a lot of reinvention of the wheel here. I think when I spoke to Niels at Zaha and Francis at Foster's, they were talking about maybe sharing some of this technology that there's only a quid pro quo. Everybody's developing something. If we all put what we've developed out there to a degree, unless it's absolutely mission critical, then we can all benefit rather than having to develop it again and again and again. I mean, do you think about sharing your software?
Well, without getting too much in a sort of specific detail on that, and I'll try and sit on the fence for a second, Martin, if I can. But on one side of that fence, you've got, say, something like EC3, which is from the Carbon Leadership Forum, which Autodesk and a number of very big name design firms put together this embodied carbon calculator, made it publicly available. Fantastic initiative. Many practices, I'm sure, have been using it. We looked at it, we decided to go our own way because we wanted to be able to calculate embodied carbon based on RICS categories, which is what our clients were more interested in. The EC3 carbon tool was a lot more generic and international, and didn't then do what we needed for our clients. So I think when you open source things, you're inevitably never going to, it waters it down slightly. You're never going to kind of get that direct requirement that fits your business. And to kind of go on the other side of the fence for a second and kind of bang the drum for that kind of level of open sourceness. I mean, the UK Dynamo user group, which like me, Kevin, and many other practices here support and kind of contribute to and help organize, was deliberately founded because this was a tool that Autodesk released that allowed their customers to solve their own problems. well, we were all solving the same problems ourselves, and that
Right.
felt wasteful, and that felt kind of a poor use of everybody's time, and really that community and that kind of community around that was founded based on, let's grab a beer, let's grab a pizza, I'll show you what we've been up to, you show us what you've been up to, and let's share that knowledge and exchange those ideas. So I think it's the right direction. I definitely think it's the right direction to have, but every company is going to have to bring that into their own business in a slightly different way, I think.
Communities are important. That's the important thing about this, is that by having that platform to share the information with a common interest, you solve each other's problems. That's great.
At practice level, the kind of challenges that companies face is historically a lot of these practices, when you think about kind of 2D drafting platforms, they've only ever used one platform, whether that be AutoCAD, MicroStation, Vectorworks, and everybody within that practice has been trained to use that one platform, so that information is transferable amongst individuals. And as we move into the area of open source, and a lot of people may be using ArchiCAD or Revit or various other platforms out there, but still, majority of the practices are only using one piece of software.
Yeah.
As we move towards more open source, there's going to be niche areas. It's similar that is kind of growing up at the moment in terms of like Rhino within practices. But the issue will be when those individuals, the loss of knowledge within the organization if those individuals leave. And how do you transfer that information from Blender into Revit or into ArchiCAD or into Vectorworks or Open Designer, and it's those are the kind of issues that a lot of the companies are kind of facing moving forwards now. It's about democratizing the kind of the knowledge within an organization. It becomes an even greater challenge, really, because no longer are you just training all your staff to learn one piece of software. You now need them to be technology experts as well as being good quality designers,
which doesn't get taught in schools.
That was interesting, Kevin. You know, I was just going to say exactly the same thing. So we had our first request for Blender the other day, which we were happy to give, so that they could try it out. But I know that knowledge will probably sit within a small team. You know, we've got 4 studios, we've got nearly 300 staff. That message probably won't get across to different teams, and as you said, the experience might then disappear, and we'll have file formats and information that other people can't get into, might not realise what was used to create it.
We have a tough job, Nick, don't we, to try and help teams have any tool that they need, but not go down a rabbit hole where you're left with a redundant news or doesn't sit certain workflow.
They're creative people. We don't want to hold them back. We want them to be creative. But we had a situation recently where we, as an organisation, we decided that Enscape is our preferred tool for sort of VR and visualization. Somebody said, talk about Lumion. Let's try Lumion. I said, well, hang on a minute. Why are we going for another product? Just because somebody's said they want to try it, and if we do, then we're looking after 2 products. We've got that training of those 2 products, and if that person does leave and nobody else has got that experience, we're left with models we can't and information we can't use. So there's a balance. There's a real balance, but we don't want to stifle creativity.
Yeah, and I think it's up to each company as well to choose their own tool of choice, so that they if you want to use ArchiCAD, then that's your prerogative, that's your company's decision, and you train on that. I think where open source for me has got a real potential is in that sort of data sharing environment. I mean, everyone knows IFC, which is becoming a lot more, I mean, that's an open source format in itself, but the whole infrastructure that sits around IFC, how you extract and share and manage the information once the project's been delivered, big clients like airports and government, who have portfolios, wide ranging, and architects and engineers who are working on that sort of wide ranging different platforms, that all the whole ecosystem of their data needs to be interrogated and able to be accessed by some kind of platform that can really see into all that information and it's structured in a similar way. And I think that's really where open source will have its power.
I think users don't realize the constraints that are on the IT managers to try and not have this kind of mess of products appear. And while the demand for them might be instantaneous, I want this, I've seen this, this is good. The reality of trying to keep your tech stack clean and tech stack not fraying at the edges is it's not really their understanding. They don't get that point of view of, here we go, here are the problems you're going to introduce by just taking on another product or taking on several products, which might be open source from somewhere else, and cause issues. I mean, yeah, the industry hasn't really had that many viruses or anything particularly horrible, but it could quite easily end up with people using things from open source that might not necessarily be for the power of good. Still, we have to wait.
And sadly, that leads into other areas like Cyber Essentials and ISO 27001, where we have to keep everything up to date, and it just adds more problems. And they don't often appreciate that, but that's something we have to think about, especially with open source. Open source is open source.
So you get to be the bad guys.
Yeah, regularly.
But that's the role of digital design leaders and IT leaders, is to extend the landscape as far as they can, find the ways to best data wrangle and to the best working methodologies to be interoperable, and make sure that knowledge gets to all the places it can do within the business, in order to to keep the business moving forward as successfully as it can. And I think that's is a challenge, and it's a challenge every day of the week that everybody has to be up to get the most out of their stack and whatever their future stack might be. So it's a challenge that most people relish, because it never changes. You've got to keep pushing.
I think one of the challenges for developers, as well as certainly for open sources, is that people now require interoperability from the get-go of a product. So as soon as a product comes to market, we need to be able to generate something in there and potentially transfer it to another product. So it's no longer just them focusing on the development of that product. They also need to focus on the ability to interoperate with other platforms as well.
So there's an element where you guys are trying to de-silo. The last thing you want is another silo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's an interesting one. You put yourself in the shoes of a developer, and you say, what's the best way to start software development? That's not my area of expertise, but what I would say is start with an open platform as a base, because you'll then avoid all of the headaches of, oh, I need to build this for that piece of software, and I need to build this for that piece of software, and I need to build importers and exporters every year, and all of those softwares are going to change on a yearly basis, and I need to keep that up to date as well. I mean, this isn't a direct dig in any way at Enscape, but Enscape have to build a version for ArchiCAD and a version for Revit and a version for SketchUp, if it was more interoperable from the beginning, they wouldn't have those headaches, and we wouldn't have those headaches either. So I think developers just need to accept we will need to use lots of other tools, not just their own. And that's why it should be recognized as a positive, as a selling mechanism to their tool, by making it more interoperable, by building ecosystems where only their tools talk to their own tools. That's not a selling point. It needs to be open. That we'll always need other tools.
So, okay, we'll leave collaboration. We kind of went into management a little bit there. We'll probably come back to that. But 2D, so BIM was developed ideally to produce a 3D model to produce 2D drawings. That was the utopia that everyone was promised, was that you create the model and your 2D drawings are free. What I'm seeing is you create your 3D model and you still spend most of your time trying to get 2D drawings out as you want them to. So the massive amount of productivity benefit from BIM hasn't yet been realized because the output still doesn't match the utopian dream at the start. There are some architectural firms I talk to who just can't wait to get rid of 2D. There are people who are saying that they only have 2D for their clients, only have 2D for certain construction firms. They'd rather go and work with CATIA or do 3D modeling direct to manufacture. They're all signature architects. What is it about 2D? Are we kind of trapped in this 2D metaphor because of the process and the legal requirements and all the history? Or is it actually an essential part of the process, and therefore it deserves to be properly fixed, and there needs to be this proper automation of 2D drawings where you don't have to worry about it?
I think there's a generational thing with it as well. I think yes, contractually, the contractual deliverables, the drawings are, nearly the top of the stack after specifications. So we all know that the current legal framework is not probably fit for purpose in a 3D modeling environment. But 2D, all the leaders and owners of practice today grew up in a 2D world, and their design skills are largely honed in a 2D world with elements of 3D in it. And I think that's quite a big challenge in terms of where models sit, because even with a Revit model today, you're still really only generating general arrangement information, so its potential is capped at a threshold of gradation, which is not where total building documentation sits. So there's massive opportunities to do things better than they can be done at the moment, and 2D is still a fundamental piece of that world. Your average electrician walking around the site is more likely it's more likely not to have a plan under his arm, but that's the unit of which he's going to wander around the building and try and install stuff.
There's a point to suggest it's the most interoperable, accessible methodology for someone to understand, construction at this point in time. That there's history, there's a precursor to this process in which a drawing allows somebody to comprehend how things come together. In 10 years, hopefully sooner, we're talking about a generation of people who are more comfortable spinning around something in 3D than they are probably looking at a drawing. So I think we're on an inevitable change no matter what happens. But I think one thing that was sort of hinted at there that actually needs to be discussed is that a lot of the requirements of an architecture practice today is to capture the technical construction detail that perhaps can only be picked up on a drawing or on a set of 40 drawings for cladding or a facade package, which trying to get a facade fully modeled in 3D accurately, one-to-one, etc., so someone can possibly spin around and only look at a piece of that, there is this kind of awkwardness that I think we all recognize, which is, will we ever get our models up to that point where they are that detailed? And I say will we, should we is probably the better way of putting it. Should we get our models to that level of detail? Is that a good use of our time? Is that a good use of our efficiency? And is it practical in terms of the tools we use today to be able to have our buildings at that detail everywhere in 3D? Is it a good use of our time, and can it handle it? And I think when you just take that argument away and you just say, here's 30 drawings that show what you need to know, that's the tough thing I think from my perspective, at least anyway.
There are still using software that's at the moment it's probably not capable of doing that.
No, that's a really good point actually, because you've got to remember the huge part of what drawings actually did was about taking what we'd wanted to show and giving it some narrative. There was an element of narrative that had to come with drawings, and arguably we sort of, as designers, we've trained a lot of the industry to accept that the way we produce drawings was the right way to do it. I guess if you go back much further in history, a lot of our design sort of content, obviously we didn't have the 3D graphical capability, so a lot of our buildings were designed by elevation. They weren't designed by really complex 3D models, and that's been a migration for us. And I guess the interim step was that we trained a lot of our clients and people that we worked with to understand plans really comprehensively. It took us a really long time to do it, and I guess we've now got to make another investment to train them to assess things we're doing in a different format. I think also because we've become so obsessed with space and how spaces fit together and being efficient in buildings, that sort of lends itself well diagrammatically in plans than it does in other forms of things. So I guess it's trying to stitch together that geometry side and the narrative side to what we're doing, because we've always had to accept that there are certain times where our designs are being explored without us. So a drawing is a good way to sort of capture some of that.
So if drawings are going to be with us for another decade or another 20 years, what has to happen to the design tools to give you productivity benefits? If they could really be automatic, where you didn't have to worry about being sued on the drawing because it was checked by AI, it was automatically referenced to all the other packages that are sent, and so that you end up knowing that the right drawing got to the right person at the right time. Those kind of things are kind of almost being automated by some of the cloud systems. Autodesk is looking at AI in improve. They're realizing that most of the problems on site start at the drawing phase, so they're now looking at drawings for what's omitted from drawings, where and when they were sent. So what kind of things would you wish for to improve 2D drawings?
I wonder if AI automating during production might be slightly optimistic, at least in today's world, because there will always be risk. There will always be a risk assessment done in terms of whether we would trust or feel confident, or at what point does our insurers cover certain activities and not cover certain activities. But I wanted to maybe share a kind of a really interesting conversation I once had with Anthony Hackett, ex Autodesk, and now in his own venture, where he used an analogy to me which has sort of stuck with me for a while, and I think is a really really important one to share, which is, at HMM we do fire plans. We do fire plans again and again and again and again and again on hundreds of projects, and we start a new project, we do the fire plan for the first floor, second floor. It kind of knows what we need to do for the other floors of that building. In fact, it could probably automate that process to a point where it says, you're doing fire plans, here's your fire plans, I've taken it 80% of the way, do you want to do the final 20%? And that's just a perfect example of where technology should be helping us in those scenarios. It's based on all of your design work that you've done previously. Here's what we think you might be trying to apply to this new set of information. And it's the kind of same arguments we've been having for years. Architects used to complain about Revit and the fact that you draw a plan and you've got your elevations and your sections, and it's going to replace us and all that kind of stuff. It's just reducing the amount of mundane work that we would have to be doing. I'm sure not many people enjoy doing fire plans, for example. But it's interesting to see where the vendors go, and again, whether they make something too generic and too watered down, or whether they make something specific to you as a practice, or give you the tools to be able to do that. We've just finished a machine learning based tool that populates apartment layouts, placing all the furniture and interior walls and all that kind of stuff based on our catalogue of previous apartments. So, you know, we as a practice have already started this process in some respects. But, you know, we're an architecture practice, we're not a software vendor.
Has anyone else used AI?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, actually, just to piggyback on Aaron's comments, that's a very similar conversation I've had with a vendor recently, actually, and part of me would really love our software vendors to agree on what some of our core packages should look like collectively as an industry standard, so that they all work towards those same objectives. I think there's an element under the hood with a lot of software applications that they're always so keen to be open and customizable. But actually, that still means when you buy it, you have to do a load of work in customization. And actually, as we said, we sort of know the way certain drawing packages and a huge amount of work that we do should look. So why couldn't that come predetermined? I compared some templates from a vendor recently that were perhaps some were UK-based templates and others were other European-based templates. And depending on which country you sort of look at their template, depends how much predetermined customization is inside there. And actually, it was really nice to see that some countries work really hard at maintaining a higher standard of sort of baseline drawing requirements than perhaps we do. So it'd be nice to get that wrapped up in an international standard, really.
Which countries? Germany.
I think it was Germany and possibly Hungary.
Interesting.
I don't know if anybody remembers, I was part of the BIM for Regs group a number of years ago, where there was a number of organisations with the government backing, trying to figure out if they could build a tool to actually run BIM models through building regs. And it went very quiet, and I think they realised that actually certain parts of the building regulations you can run through AI and check, but there are a lot of parts of building regulations that are open to interpretation and cannot be done in that way. You know, we're looking at the bioregs for residential as well, and you know, building rules to run through your models to look at escape routes and distances and all sorts of other things. But yeah, we're building those ourselves.
But you also have such a wide variety of people who, the way people model, that you end up with no two models from two firms are the same, no two models from two different people are the same. They just approach things in different style. Okay, if you're mainly using Lego architecture and you're dragging and dropping it, yeah, components are the same, but it's still how well are they actually joined together actually holistically in the model is another question. I don't know. It'd be interesting. That's why you got things like Celebri and model checking, and that model checking and quality checking is huge. It's a market in itself. I mean,
it's a starting point, but I don't think it can. It's utopia. I don't think it will do everything at the moment. It's a long way off.
Definitely aren't in utopia. So when we had a call the other week, Ian said that for the industry to move from 2D to 3D BIM was a huge multi-decade effort, and now we stand at the crossroads of like new generations of software, and so it's going to be a lot easier for you to move to the next paradigm, the next level, whatever that is. Should that be in the cloud? Should that be a combination? Should that be a different software to Revit? Should that be whatever comes up? But you've kind of made that difficult journey. You've crossed from 2D into 3D. So I'm wondering, in the last 15, 20 years, what did you learn in making that journey from 2D drawings to being BIM experts? And how would you apply that to migrating to anywhere else, or migrating to the next generation?
I think kind of moving from 2D to 3D was in certain ways was probably the easy step, because it was quite a linear path. It was just visualizing the building in an easier way. But as we move into kind of information models and into the future as well, we've essentially kind of opened up a doorway into it's like hundreds or thousands of possibilities of this 3D model. So it actually makes it a little bit more difficult to move into the next stage, because there's so many areas that people want to look at. So whether that be kind of utilizing generative design, or whether it's analysis of your building, or whether it's how comfortable spaces are in terms of walking around, in terms of the acoustics as well. And it's thinking about the technologies that are required for those each individual tasks. And so it becomes even more complex as we move into the next generation, because everybody will focus on what's important to their particular organizations.
Yeah, you've been doing this a while.
Yeah, I think part of the change was that intellectual change, not just 2D, 3D. I mean, 3D's been a part of the landscape for a long time, but it's about, as Kevin said, the information that goes with the modeling process and the processes of BIM that the industry now has pretty much got its head around as a process, albeit still within the context of a 20th century legal model. So I think that the intellectual challenge has been met by lots of people, but it's what can the technology do? You know, when Revit and BIM are so closely associated from a marketing perspective, it's educated clients and contractors that a particular software product is the future and the only way that you should work, which has not been a necessarily healthy outcome. So diversity, as Kevin has said, is a big part of the next piece. So agility, flexibility, pragmatism, interoperability, you know, all those different vectors are things that people have going to have to deal with in a very different way than the way they have so far, because there won't be that same one platform constraint. There can't be, because the industry can't operate in that way. There isn't going to be, you know, Autodesk are not going to can't be that central hub again. It's not going to make the industry can't work on that basis.
So, and interoperability is the thing that is mentioned more and more and more. It's the thing which has been obvious in where we've got to, that it's the thing that wasn't fixed. IFC was always a token fix. Has got better over the time, but it's not really going to solve all problems. But it's the nearest thing we've got at the moment. So, what kind of interoperability does this industry need that it doesn't currently have?
I think there's a lot of challenges around. I think we're in for a difficult period. We've sort of, many of us have already started that, and that difficult period is a switch. It's a switch between what we're used to, which is file formats and models of a file size in a yearly version and all the other like kind of added things that we are so used to battling, to what is now a modern methodology of building and delivering software, which is to do with the web, and it's to do with JSON files, and it's to do with, you know, no such thing as a 2017 model. That's not a premise of the future of software development. And many of the tools that we've been delivered in recent years are starting to kind of help us understand that a bit more. But that's where the future is. That's absolutely where the future is. The future is away from file formats. And, you know, attempting to be a BIM purist for a second, I recognize the value of IFC, and I recognize the value of even universal scene descriptions and things happening in the more visualization space that I'm very comfortable with. But clearly going forward, software vendors are more interested in building tools in a more web-enabled methodology that allows them to deliver updates without a user realizing, deliver features without having upgrades and painful kind of transitions of documents and data and so on and so forth. Clearly, that's where we're heading. I think that is somewhat inevitable. But we're going to go in for a very painful period over the next few years where a lot of our businesses are trying that transition, and many of the vendors and software vendors probably going at it in different ways. The whole Amazon AWS versus kind of 365 and versus other hosting platforms and anything and everything in between. I think that's the challenge. I definitely think that's the challenge. I think at the moment, a lot of software vendors are just adding on a cloud part to their product, like a cloud offering as part of their subscription fee. But the problem with that is it might take away some of the IT infrastructure costs of not having to, servers and all that kind of stuff. But if I'm going down the SketchUp route and I've got all my SketchUp models in SketchUp Cloud, and I'm going down the Bentley route and I've got all my models saved in their cloud system, and I'm going down an Autodesk route and I've got all my models saved in their system, that's heading me into a new area of hell. So I think generally speaking, we've probably got a bit more of an uncomfortable period ahead of us as our software tools that we use change from being desktop file format product to being something a little bit more open and a little bit more flexible. But there's pain ahead, I fear.
Yeah, I think interoperability seems to be a bit of an afterthought in a lot of these cases. And obviously, Erin touched on it there in terms of the various like cloud stacks that are kind of floating around. But in one of the issues that we've already seen with some products that have come to the market already is you can very easily get their products into their cloud. If you want to get somebody else's file system or file design, building, whatever into that, you've got to import it into their product on their desktop and then push it up into the cloud. There's no direct connection between those cloud environments, and there's no ability from these other platforms to connect directly to the other vendors' clouds. And that's the issue. And that's kind of where the industry needs, that's one of the key issues that the industry needs to resolve in kind of short to medium term. Obviously, the long-term strategy for kind of interoperability is actually as these platforms are moving towards kind of web services, it's about breaking down the individual chunks of designing a building into kind of microservices and having all that information stored within one place that's accessed by everybody. So your microservice just acts upon the information in the cloud that everyone else has access to, and you might have controls at permission level, so accessing or manipulating that information, and other people will be able to see that information potentially in real time and be able to perform their own analysis on that information or data. And obviously that will all depend on their capabilities and their roles on the projects as well. So we're kind of starting seeing the building being instead of being held within an individual file on somebody's system or servers, that actually it's pushed up into the cloud and then it's pulled apart again, and then people can access just the tiny little bits of the building that's appropriate to them.
Hopefully through their APIs.
Yeah.
I think there's still that sort of legal issue to overcome, because interoperability means passing something from one person to another in a format that they can read it. And then that's fine at the moment. We chuck stuff over the wall when we're ready to. So we expose information that we're happy with, and we pass it on. But Kevin, you're moving into an area where, as you know, that there's certain insurers that would shudder with having shared environments that are open to all, because then there's the risk of something not being complete or not being signed off that other people access. So I think there's a lot of work to be done from the legal point of view and the PI insurance point of view before we can happily go around that interoperable route.
I think we've already
got those. I was going to say, I concur with that. The whole industry needs to be very wary about where our liabilities lie, and it's great to move forward, but we've got to be really careful about what happens if something goes wrong. And just moving data into the cloud is a big thing as well, which we're unsure about how that's going to pan out.
And where it sits. I mean, we've recently embarked on some work with a government agency, and we're all to do with the new digital record and fire safety case reviews. And we were going to do a survey, and then we found out from the government agency that we weren't allowed to use SurveyMonkey because it wasn't GDPR compliant. So we had to pull the survey and look at, even though SurveyMonkey said that they were GDPR compliant, we weren't allowed to use it. So suddenly the cloud became a blocker for us, because we couldn't guarantee where that data sat. So I'm not saying that I'm against it. I'm all for progress, but I think there's some legal challenges and PI insurance challenges to overcome.
So we're running out of time. So I'm going to shoot to one question which I thought would be interesting. This is so keeping a technology stack working is akin to balance all that's always moving forward. There's always bits that are changing and updating. How can software firms make the job of the IT expert easier when keeping workflows in motion during the evolution of their individual components for you? There's a lot of talk about them being your partners and being, best buddies with you, but the reality is that they help break things as much as they help fix things. So what can you tell the software service providers, software developers, how to make your lives easier?
I'll go off with one straight away, which is if you're going to change your licensing models before you've actually got the admin tools to effectively allow IT leaders and digital design leaders to manage the software stack you've got, you're going to get a lot of stick from your customers, because you're being, frankly, you're sticking it to the customers when you haven't got the admin tools to help them do the job they're doing. So and there's fundamental things like integrating with Microsoft Active Directory. Everybody's Active Directory security model is in the cloud waiting to be accessed. Why do you then come out with a new licensing model that doesn't access that core infrastructure that everybody's using? Next.
Not mentioning any names.
No.
Maybe we could just use our open letter as a sort of a format for for where to go with that one.
I think a big one for me is testing. The amount of times we've been stung by vendors releasing the latest and greatest service pack or updates, and it's very, very difficult to do full rigorous testing yourselves when you've got a very, very business practice to run. We've certainly come a cropper a number of times from vendors such as Autodesk, even Nemetschek with Vectorworks and Adobe in particular. Getting more rigorous testing schedule. Make sure that you're releasing products and updates that actually work, and understand the systems that we're installing them on. Make sure your support guys understand the systems that you're supporting them on as well. Make sure that NVIDIA Quadro cards are not seen as some voodoo that we don't understand how to support. Just put testing for me. Make sure your tools, make sure the products are actually fit for purpose, and make sure that when you release updates, they work. That's a big one for me, having been stung recently.
And I think that could have a bigger impact. Some of us in the group saying about the sort of web parts in the future and not having a big application that you install. At the moment, we have a big application that we install and sometimes breaks another one. When you've got lots and lots of web parts, making all those talk to each other and the different releases and the different versions could become even more of an issue. So I agree, testing.
It's out of your control as well. At that point,
absolutely.
It's somewhere else.
I mean, if you look at some applications now, if you're in the cloud, like SharePoint, you don't. I know they're not a design tool, but you don't get a choice. If Microsoft updates SharePoint and it breaks your SharePoint platform, it's tough. Whereas in the past, you had it in your organisation. You could test it, and before you deployed it. So I think that challenge is going to become even greater.
we lose a lot of control, but we'll also gain a lot of responsibility. And you know, in the past, if somebody was beating me with a stick for an application not working, I can deal with that, but it's very, very difficult. So I think the move to the cloud is obviously, you know, it's positive. There's a lot of positives there. Takes a lot of pressure off, you know, image creation, image deployment, application deployment. But when it goes wrong, it could be catastrophic. And some means of version control on the cloud would be interesting as well, rather than being forced into a kind of an auto update or whatever release track. I don't know how all that's going to be catered for, but you know, it'd certainly be wary of being in a kind of an auto update track. So yeah, how all that's managed will be interesting to see.
Coming back to your question, Martin, about you know, best buddies in one in one layer, but actually the applicability of updates of tools to your requirements. I think a lot of the vendors might not have quite the right culture as they reach a certain customer base, as they reach a certain volume. They, I guess, lose track a little bit, and you know, I recognize that that's a very difficult challenge, but you know, a lot of the time, some of these larger organizations, they then ensure that a lot of their feedback is coming from a certain group of customers rather than a broad spectrum of customers. And sometimes that group of customers is because they're their biggest accounts, or you know, whatever that might be, and it doesn't necessarily reflect a global audience, where certain regions might be impacted quite substantially by, you know, local regulations that, or international standards as they might now be, and they can't deliver those in the tools by default, and that should have been recognized by engaging with the wider audience. And that's an impossible challenge in some ways, but it's an important challenge to kind of continue, because you know, if you're allowing your marketing teams to drive a lot of the features that are added to your software, that doesn't help your customers that are already using your tools. And you know, I'll give a specific example here where, you know, in the last few years, Autodesk have spent a lot of time with Revit and making it work better with SketchUp. You know, that felt to us as an area specifically controlled by a marketing team looking at market share. You know, how do we target those customers that are not yet using Revit, that are using SketchUp, that, you know, we want to improve that relationship, when actually a huge number of their customers are screaming for basic functionality, which should be the priority over a workflow that not only appeals to a very minor amount of people, but also it's outside of, you know, an area you would have expected them to work on better, which is the sort of Formit to Revit relationship, which you would have thought, you know, needed some work as well. And it's a challenging one. I recognize it's a challenging one, but for me, going forward, these organizations, not just Autodesk, but others, need to engage with their customers, need to understand how their customers are using their software, what are their common problems. You know, if you're going to create platforms that allow your customers to give feedback, integrate with those platforms, use those platforms, get that feedback, and make sure it's broad feedback and it's not just coming from a select group of promoters, perhaps.
I guess one of the problems is when you get 1 million customers, great news, you've got 1 million customers, bad news, you've got 1 million customers. Now multiply that by a factor of 10, and it's very difficult to filter out the noise, to work out what is. So I can see the software companies' problems just as much as anyone else. But when you've got top customers, they really are, most firms I talk to are focused on a very small number of actual samples, not the masses, and that's the way it goes. And when you've got a mature product, you're wondering where you can sell it next. You're not really worrying about, you've already mined that seam, where else can I go? And that's a problem. That is a problem.
It's also about customer retention as well, because ultimately, if the customer base feel as though they're no longer being considered, or the industry is moving in a particular direction or typologies, as I mentioned previously, if we use no longer supports our ways of working, and the vendors aren't listening to our points in terms of improvements that we'd like to see, then we have no choice but to look further afield and see whether there are other platforms or other vendors that will listen to our concerns. And I think that's the issue in the world that we live in, that we're working with products that are so large, and the companies that develop them are so focused on a small pool of their customer base that the wider ones feel slightly disenfranchised. And that's, to a certain extent, I think that's kind of what's driven the open letter from this group as well.
I'm going to leave the last word with Ian. So obviously the open letter is still open and people can apply to join. And if they join, what can they look forward to from the original group? What kind of communications?
We're trying to keep them up to date with the discussions that we're having, and I think we're sort of just coming to the end of the sort of first phase of the dialogue with Autodesk. So the intent is that there will be, more phases and more opportunity for the wider community to connect into the conversations we're having. We've had an awful lot of feedback from people who've signed up on the website, letters to autodesk.com. So if the intent is to grow that community globally and to keep everybody as informed as possible at how they can contribute to the next set of outcomes that we're aiming to achieve with licensing, compliance, interoperability, and the future of design tools.
Thanks a lot. Cheers, guys. Thanks for your time.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thank you.